Of all the confounding results in this past election, perhaps the strangest phenomenon was the surprising number of people who voted for Democrats down ballot and then checked off Donald Trump for president. That was the case in New York's 14th district. A number of voters cast their ballot for both Trump and one of the House's most progressive Democrats, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, better known as AOC. And while the Democratic Party is still reeling from the results, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez is doing something a lot of the D.C. folks aren't doing, which is talking to social media and actually talking to voters to figure out why this happened.
If you voted for Donald Trump and me, or if you voted for Donald Trump and voted Democratic down ballot, I would really love to hear from you. This is not a place of judgment. I'm not gonna put your stuff on blast or anything like that or dunk on it. That's genuinely not the intent here. I actually want to learn from you. I want to hear what you were thinking, and I just want to hear from you.
Joining me now is the aforementioned Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York. Okay, AOC, what'd they say?
I mean, there's a lot of different things that we saw. I think there's a lot of people. First of all, it's important to note that Democrats, oftentimes when we lose elections, we think that we lost people to Trump. And that is true in circumstances, but they don't look enough at the fact that we also lost people to the couch. Mm-hmm. We have two people that we're running against. So a lot of people say, this is why I voted for you and Trump. And some people say this is why I didn't vote or didn't vote top of the ticket.
Right. Skip the top of the ticket, which, by the way, there's been a lot of paranoia about the fact that Democrats were able to win statewide in some places while Kamala Harris lost. And I keep trying to tell people there are voters who go in and either just vote the top, Trump voters who will say, I just want Trump and don't care about Republicans, and the reverse, who say, I'm not voting top of the ticket, but I'll vote everybody else.
Right, right. And I think we saw some of that happen as well. But when it comes to people who split their ticket, I think a lot of people cited several different things. One is there is universal frustration in this country, much of it, I actually think, justified, that is raging at a political establishment that centers corporate interests, billionaires, and puts their needs ahead of the needs of working Americans. And we know that we can either channel this righteous rage, because there are people whose SNAP was cut off, their child tax credits were cut off, but they're seeing people like Elon Musk getting tax breaks and kissing up to Donald Trump in order to do so.
But they vote for, then why vote for Elon Musk and Donald Trump?
And I think that, of course, is the question.
It makes no sense.
And I think part of it has to do with the fact that, and I think we're still in a process of going through the data. It's important to say that.
Yes.
And I actually think that it's important to say that the people who are rushing to say, let me give you my grand theory of what's going on right now.
The problem is you went too woke. Sorry, Kamala Harris was running with Liz Cheney at her side. She wasn't going, quote unquote, woke.
If we had an election on November 5th and November 6th, you've got an answer.
Right.
Don't listen to those people.
I agreed.
Do not listen to those people.
Co-signed.
So I want to say that we should all have the humility of saying this is an ongoing learning process. However, there is something to be said about it doesn't matter that he's lying. He's saying that I'm fighting for you. In all of this debate that people are talking about with this woke thing, right?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. It's because we care about trans people, and that's why.
And by the way, only Donald Trump cared about trans people because he was the one running $130 million worth of ads. The Harris campaign said nothing about this issue.
That's right. That's right. And listen, the ads, it's not to even deny the fact that these ads were effective in certain areas. What I think people are paying too much attention to is the first half of that ad, which says Kamala Harris is, or that said, Kamala Harris is for they, them. Everyone's focusing on that. They're not focusing on the second half of that ad, where he said, Donald Trump is for you.
Yeah, yeah.
And Democrats very often, in their messaging, they speak in terms and in concepts and not in the second person. I care about you. And political races are not about one candidate versus another candidate. Too often it gets pigeonholed like that. It is a race to convince a person about who cares about you more.
Let me ask you this question, because we've been talking a lot about RFK Jr. My mind is a bit blown. I mean, we knew that Donald Trump would go wild. There's no constraints on him. He could just put all his friends in. But we're talking about RFK Jr. and the possibility of people pulling back on measles vaccines, on another pandemic happening. You're talking about Matt Gaetz. There's a 17-year-old girl out there terrified that all of her records, all of the witnesses against him in this case where she was trafficked, could be in the hands of Matt Gaetz, and he could be the most powerful law enforcement official in the country in a case where the president of the United States is an adjudicated sexual abuser. If you're a sexual assault survivor, you're thinking, oh my God, this country is out to get me. They're out to get me and force me to have children by sexual assault. So the message to women has been insane, okay? And the people he's nominating are TV hosts, et cetera. Do you think the people who voted for him that you've talked to were expecting this?
No. No.
Or true mass deportation.
Genuinely,
yeah,
no. And it's heartbreaking, actually. It is heartbreaking. And people may want to take like a kind of vengeful stance about this, but it is genuinely heartbreaking. People need to understand that there are people, millions of people in this country, and I was one of them, where you are working 2-3 shifts a day to try to make ends meet. You're not reading the newspaper every morning with a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
You're not. And it's not to say that people are uneducated or uninformed or anything like that. But like, this is real life. Yeah. This is real life. You got a baby on your hip and you've got 2-3 shifts to work in that day and you're just trying to make things work, and you have such an overwhelm of information. And I actually think something that is different about this moment than I saw, whether it was 2020 or after 2016, is that almost like right the day after, people immediately said, were coming to me and saying, he's not actually going to do that, right? And it's important to say, people may often say, he said he was going to do this. It was right here on the campaign trail. If you actually listen to him, if you listen to Donald Trump's acceptance speech, when he talked about immigration, he talked about legal pathways first.
Yeah. Yeah. He didn't say he was going to do.
He didn't lead with mass deportation.
Absolutely.